Daphne Lowell hadn't meant to slice her palm open on a rusted wire fence behind the town's only coffee shop. But that's exactly what happened 5 minutes after she ditched her car and walked into Fremont, Wyoming, pretending she wasn't worth millions. "You okay?" A deep voice called out behind her just as the blood started to drip down her wrist. She turned, biting her lip to keep from swearing. A man, tall, broad-shouldered, mid-30s, rushed toward her, holding a little boy's hand. The child, maybe 4 or 5, stared at her wide-eyed. "I'm fine," she lied, cradling her hand. "No, you're not," the man said, already pulling a clean napkin from the coffee shop bag he was carrying. "Wes, stay right here." The boy nodded obediently, planting himself on the sidewalk as the man moved closer. "I'm Quinn Dorsey," he said, crouching. "Let me see." "I'm Daphne," she replied, reluctantly extending her hand. The second his fingers touched hers, a jolt shot up her arm. His hands were warm, calloused, and careful. He wrapped the napkin gently around her wound, tightening it just enough to stop the bleeding. "You probably need stitches," he said, his voice low and calm. "There's a clinic 2 blocks from here. I'll walk you." "I can manage," she said, but her legs were already wobbling. "I'm not letting you faint in the middle of Main Street," he replied. "Come on." Wes grabbed my hand. Daphne had never been led anywhere before, at least not without a bodyguard or assistant trailing behind her. But here she was, walking beside a stranger who didn't recognize her from Forbes or the Wall Street Journal, and thank God for that. Inside the clinic, while a nurse cleaned her up, Daphne watched Quinn from the corner of her eye as he sat reading a book to his son. His voice was soft, patient. Wes laughed at something, and Quinn ruffled the boy's hair. "Single dad," the nurse whispered knowingly. Daphne nodded, not quite sure why her stomach flipped. When she walked back out, a clean bandage on her hand, Quinn stood up immediately. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah, thanks to you." "Good." He hesitated. "Do you need a ride somewhere?" "No, I'm staying at the Fremont Inn, just a few blocks." "You're not from here," he said, more of a statement than a question. "Nope, passing through," something like that. He studied her for a second, then held out his hand again. "Well, Daphne, I'm glad I was there to help. If you need anything, I run the hardware store on Oak, Dorsey's Hardware." Of course he did. She shook his hand. "Thanks, Quinn." He turned to go, but Wes tugged his sleeve. "Dad, can she come to the Fall Fest?" Daphne blinked. "What's the Fall Fest?" Quinn chuckled. "It's a big town thing. Bonfire, pie-eating contest, cider, fireworks. Wes loves it." "It's tomorrow," Wes added helpfully. Daphne opened her mouth to make an excuse but didn't. "I'd love to." Quinn raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" "Yeah, I could use some." "Normal?" He smiled, the kind that made her stomach twist in a way she hadn't felt in years. "Okay, I'll see you there." They walked in opposite directions, and Daphne tried not to grin. She hadn't planned to stay in Fremont, but now, she wasn't so sure. The next day, she found herself brushing her hair twice and changing her top 3 times before finally walking to the Fall Fest. The town square was glowing with string lights, hay bales, food stalls, and music. Kids ran around with caramel apples and painted faces. She spotted Quinn near the cider stand, holding a cup in one hand and resting the other protectively on Wes's shoulder. He looked up and saw her. His whole face lit up. "You made it," he said. "You sound surprised." "I'm always surprised when beautiful women keep promises," he said casually, handing her a cup of cider. Daphne laughed. "Is that so?" Wes tugged her hand. "Come see the goats." She let him drag her to the petting zoo, then helped him feed a baby goat while Quinn watched, arms crossed, amusement in his eyes. "You're good with him," he said. "I like kids." "Ever think of having any?" She blinked, caught off guard. "Someday." "Maybe." He looked down, then back at her. "His mom left when he was a baby." "I'm sorry." "It's okay. He's my whole world now." Daphne looked at the little boy giggling with a goat and felt something ache in her chest. Quinn wasn't just a good dad, he was a great one. They spent the rest of the evening together. She learned that Quinn had taken over the hardware store when his father passed. He worked 6 days a week, coached Little League, and still made time to bake pancakes every Sunday. He didn't ask what she did, and she didn't tell him. When the fireworks started, Wes climbed onto his dad's shoulders, and Daphne stood beside them, her fingers brushing Quinn's arm. He looked down. "Cold?" "A little." He shrugged off his flannel jacket and draped it over her shoulders like it was nothing, but it was something. It was everything. That night, back in her suite at the Fremont Inn, she stared at her bandaged hand. Quinn had wrapped it without hesitation, without asking who she was, without realizing he'd just touched the hand of a woman worth $22 million, and maybe, just maybe. Without knowing he'd wrapped up her heart, too. The morning sun filtered through gauzy curtains as Daphne sat cross-legged on the edge of the bed, her phone dark and untouched beside her. She hadn't opened a single email in 3 days. No investor updates, no board memos, no calendar alerts. But she wasn't avoiding them. Not exactly. She was choosing silence for once. There was a light knock on her door. She crossed the room and opened it to find the innkeeper, Mrs. Callahan, holding a small basket of blueberry scones. "These just came out of the oven," she said cheerfully. "Thought you might like a few for breakfast." Daphne accepted them with a quiet thank you, touched more than she expected by the gesture. "You planning to see anyone in town today, dear?" "I might walk by the bookstore." Mrs. Callahan gave her a knowing look. "And maybe Dorsey's Hardware, too." Daphne didn't answer, but her smile gave her away. She walked into town an hour later, the wind teasing her hair as she passed familiar storefronts. She hadn't intended to stop at the hardware store, but her feet carried her there anyway. The bell above the door jingled softly as she stepped inside. Quinn stood behind the counter, sleeves rolled up, measuring a piece of copper pipe. He looked up when he saw her, and the way his eyes lit up made her throat tighten. "I was starting to think I imagined you," he said, wiping his hands on a cloth. "I was just passing by." "Sure you were." His grin deepened. "You want the tour of a hardware store," she teased, raising an eyebrow. "Hey, don't knock it. This is practically the town museum." She followed him through the aisles as he pointed out oddities. A saw used to cut the ribbon at the store's opening in the 60s. A rusted wrench signed by his grandfather. A faded photo of a blizzard where the whole town took shelter inside the store for 2 days. "Wait, seriously?" she asked, staring at the photo. "Yup, town lost power, so people brought blankets and candles. My mom handed out chili from a crock pot until it ran dry. I think that might be the most charming thing I've ever heard." He gave her a sideways glance. "You say that like you're not used to small-town charm." "I didn't grow up in a place like this." "No." He stopped by a shelf of light bulbs and leaned casually against it. "Where'd you grow up?" She hesitated. "Chicago, but I moved around a lot after. Military." "No, just life." Quinn didn't push. Instead, he picked up a small snow globe from the counter and handed it to her. Inside was a miniature version of Fremont's courthouse surrounded by falling glitter. "For Wes," he explained. "He's obsessed with snow globes. Has a whole shelf at home." She turned it over, watching the glitter swirl. "That's surprisingly sweet. You sound surprised. I'm not used to men with snow globe collections. Guess I'm setting new standards." They stood in a moment of comfortable quiet until a voice called from the back. "Quinn, the delivery truck stuck behind the bakery again." "Be right there," he called, then turned to her. "You free tonight?" "Depends. There's a bonfire out by the lake. It's not an event, just a few folks, some guitars, maybe a cooler of beer." "Thought you might want to come." She knew she shouldn't. That every hour she spent here made it harder to leave, but the words came before she could stop them. "All right. I'll pick you up around 6. She nodded, heart oddly light as she walked out of the store, the snow globe still in hand. That evening, Quinn's truck pulled up in front of the inn right on time. Wes sat in the back seat, kicking his sneakers against the bench. "You didn't say this was a family affair," Daphne said as she climbed in. "He insisted," Quinn said. "Don't worry. He usually falls asleep halfway through." Wes beamed at her. "You brought the goat picture." She held up the small print she'd gotten developed that afternoon. "I thought you might like it." "You're my favorite adult," he declared. "High praise," she said, glancing at Quinn. "Don't let it go to your head. He once said that to the UPS guy." The bonfire crackled at the edge of the lake, flames flickering high into the dusky sky. A few couples sat on blankets, and someone strummed a guitar softly near the shore. Daphne sat beside Quinn on a log, wrapped in a borrowed fleece blanket as Wes lay on a sleeping bag close by, already nodding off. "You ever think about leaving Fremont?" she asked, staring into the firelight. "I did. For a while, applied to colleges out west. Even got in. What happened? My dad got sick. I came back to help him run the store. After he passed, it just stuck. You ever regret it?" No, not really. He turned to her. What about you? You ever think of staying anywhere? She didn't answer right away. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the crackling fire and the soft hum of a lullaby playing from someone's phone nearby. I've stayed in a lot of places, she said finally, but I don't think I've ever belonged anywhere. Quinn studied her. Maybe you just haven't found the right place yet, or the right people. His hand brushed hers lightly. I like talking to you, he said. I like when you do. They sat like that for a long time until the fire died down and Wes stirred in his sleep. Quinn stood, lifting his son gently into his arms. I'll walk you to your door, he said. At the inn, he paused at the steps, shifting Wes's weight in his arms. Thanks for coming tonight. I'm glad I did. He hesitated. Tomorrow morning, we're going to the orchard. There's a hayride and cider donuts. You should come. She looked at the boy sleeping against his father's shoulder, at Quinn's tired eyes and the steady way he carried the weight of his world. I'll be there. She turned to go, but Quinn caught her hand for just a second. I don't know what brought you here, Daphne, but I'm glad it did. She didn't answer, because she didn't know what had brought her here either, but she was terrified it might be the only thing that had ever felt real. Daphne stood just outside the edge of the orchard, watching the hayride wind its way between rows of apple trees. The cart creaked under the weight of bundled families and kids holding cider cups in mittened hands. Quinn was at the front, one arm looped around Wes, the other braced on the wooden frame as the tractor pulled them forward in slow, lurching intervals. She hadn't expected to feel nervous, but her heart kicked against her ribs like she'd stepped into something far more dangerous than autumn festivities. Hey, Quinn called when he spotted her. You made it just in time. We're doing another lap. Wes waved, his cheeks pink from the wind. Come sit with us. Daphne climbed up. The wood was cold beneath her, but Quinn shifted to make space beside him, his leg brushing hers as she sat. You okay? He asked. I'm good. Just cold. He reached behind him and pulled a plaid blanket from a crate, wrapping it around her shoulders without asking. She hadn't said she was freezing, but somehow he always noticed the things she didn't say. Wes has been talking about this since last week, he said. He's trying to beat last year's record for apple count. How many did he eat? 7. He threw up on the way home. Wes turned around. I still won. Daphne laughed, the sound surprising her. It had been a long time since something innocent made her feel light. As the cart rolled forward, Quinn leaned closer. You said you were just passing through, he said, but you're still here. I guess I got distracted by what? She didn't answer. Not with words, but her fingers shifted beneath the blanket until they touched his. The orchard's rose blurred past in streaks of gold and copper, and the cart swayed in a rhythm that made it feel like time might actually be pausing just long enough for her to breathe in the moment. Later, after Wes had claimed victory over 5 apples and fallen asleep in a pile of hay near the cider stand, Quinn walked with her along the edge of the field, boots crunching over leaves. You've never said what you do, he said, eyes on the horizon. I haven't. He stopped walking. Are you running from something? Daphne hesitated. Not exactly, but you're hiding. She looked up at him. Is it that obvious? You show up in a town no one's heard of, book the nicest suite without asking about the price, and don't flinch when the mayor's wife name drops local politicians. You noticed all that. I notice everything, Daphne exhaled. I needed space, away from expectations. From people thinking they know me because of what's attached to my name. Sounds like your name's worth knowing. She met his eyes. It is, but not for the reasons people think. He didn't press. Instead, he brushed a strand of hair from her cheek and let his hand linger. I don't care what you left behind, he said. I care why you're still here. She didn't have an answer, not yet, but something inside her twisted like the roots of the orchard trees, tangling deeper than she thought possible. That evening, Quinn invited her over for dinner. It's just chilly, nothing fancy, he said as he unlocked the front door. I'm not expecting a 5-star restaurant, she replied. Wes kicked off his shoes and ran toward the living room, calling for his truck set. Quinn led her to the kitchen, where a pot simmered on the stove and the scent of cumin and tomato filled the air. She leaned against the counter, watching as he stirred with practiced ease. You cook a lot. I have to. Wes eats like a linebacker. The house was warm, the kind of lived and cozy that didn't come from design but from use. A stack of children's books sat on the side table. A pair of muddy boots rested near the back door, and the fridge was covered in crayon drawings and magnets from places Quinn had probably never visited. She glanced at a photo clipped to the fridge, a younger Quinn holding a newborn, eyes tired but fierce. "That was the day I brought him home," he said as he ladled chili into bowls. "You look terrified." "I was." They sat at the table, and Wes talked through mouthfuls about school and whether pumpkins could explode if you dropped them from a roof. Quinn listened patiently, nodding, occasionally correcting a wild theory with a wry smile. After dinner, while Wes colored with markers at the coffee table, Quinn walked her to the porch. "I can drive you back," he said. "It's not far, I'd rather walk." He nodded, but didn't move. "Daphne," he said quietly, "whatever's waiting for you outside of Fremont. You don't have to go back if it's not right." She looked up at him, heart thundering. "I don't know what's right anymore." "Then stay long enough to figure it out." "I'm afraid if I stay, I won't want to leave." "Then don't." His hand found hers again, and this time neither of them let go. She walked back to the inn under a sky scattered with stars, her chest tight with something she hadn't felt in years. The terrifying, beautiful hope that maybe, just maybe, she'd finally found somewhere she could belong. But when she stepped into her room, her phone was blinking with messages. A familiar name flashed on the screen, her assistant. Her board. Her world, the one she'd left behind, had finally caught up, and tomorrow she'd have to choose. Daphne stood at the window of her suite, arms crossed tightly over her chest, watching the morning fog stretch over Fremont like a veil. Her phone lay silent on the table now. She'd made the calls last night, told her assistant she'd return to Chicago tomorrow, just long enough to finalize the transition and step away from the company she'd spent 10 years building. She wasn't running anymore. She was choosing. But first she had to tell Quinn the truth. She walked through town slower than usual, her boots scuffing the sidewalk. Every storefront felt heavier today, like the weight of goodbye was already folding in around her. She turned the corner onto Oak Street, her heart rattling. The hardware store was quiet when she stepped inside, the usual scent of sawdust and metal surrounding her like a memory. Quinn looked up from the counter, his expression shifting the moment he saw her. "You all right? I need to talk to you." He set down the box of screws in his hands. "Okay," privately. He led her into the office behind the counter, a small room with shelves lined with dusty ledgers and a calendar still stuck on last month. She turned to face him. "I haven't been honest with you." "I figured," he said gently. "I'm not who I let you think I was," his brow furrowed. "You're not married, are you?" "No," she said quickly. "It's nothing like that." He leaned back against the desk, arms crossed, waiting. "My name is Daphne Lowell. I own a financial firm in Chicago. I started it out of a borrowed apartment with 3 clients and 2 folding chairs. Now it runs portfolios worth hundreds of millions. I stepped away a few weeks ago. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Fremont was supposed to be a place to disappear for a while. I didn't expect to stay." Quinn didn't speak. His eyes didn't leave hers. "I didn't lie to you," she said. "I just didn't correct the assumptions, and then I met you, and Wes. And suddenly I didn't want to be that version of myself anymore." He nodded slowly. "You're a millionaire." "Yes, and you were never just passing through." "No. Do you have any idea what it feels like to stand next to someone who could buy the whole block and not even notice? I never wanted you to feel small. I don't." He stepped toward her. "I feel blindsided. You sat at my fire, ate at my table, held my son's hand, and all this time I had no idea who you were. I was trying to figure that out myself." He looked away, jaw tight. "Why tell me now?" "Because I'm leaving tomorrow," she said. "But not like before. I'm going back to hand over the company. I'm done. I want a life that's real, one that doesn't require a driver or a penthouse or a schedule booked 6 months out. I want to come back here. For good." He stared at her, conflict etched into every line of his face. "I should have told you sooner," she said. "You should have," he agreed. She swallowed hard. "I don't expect anything from you. I just needed you to know before I left." Quinn was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Wes asked me yesterday if you'd still come to his birthday." Her breath caught. "When's his birthday?" 3 weeks. "He said he wants you there more than cake." She blinked fast. "I'll be back before then." Good, he said. Because if you hadn't told me the truth, I wouldn't have believed any of this was real, but now I do. She stepped forward. So what happens now? I'll walk you out, he said. Then I'll walk you back in when you come home. She let out a shaky laugh, and he reached for her hand, the same one he'd wrapped with his calloused fingers days ago. His thumb brushed the spot where the bandage had been. Still healing? He asked. She nodded. Inside and out. That night, as she packed her things, she found the snow globe Quinn had given her tucked beside her scarf. She turned it over and watched the glitter fall over the tiny courthouse. The next morning, the innkeeper hugged her goodbye and handed her a paper bag. For the plane, she said, and for your heart. Inside was a blueberry scone and a note that read, Real things don't fade in the sky, they land. Daphne boarded the plane with her heart stretched across 2 places. 3 weeks later, she was back. She walked into the orchard where a dozen children were chasing balloons and streamers tangled in the branches. Wes spotted her first, running at her full speed with frosting on his cheeks. You came, I promised, didn't I? He dragged her toward the picnic table where a cake shaped like a fire truck waited. Quinn stood at the edge of the clearing, arms crossed, watching her with something quiet and unshakable behind his eyes. She walked to him and stopped inches away. I quit, she said. He raised an eyebrow. That's so. I signed the papers, handed over the keys. I have no meetings, no emails, no assistant, just me. He moved closer. And what do you want now? She didn't hesitate. This, you, Wes. Whatever we can build together. Quinn took her face in both hands, eyes locked on hers. You have no idea what it means to me that you came back, she smiled. I think I do. Then he kissed her, not gentle, not tentative, but like a man who'd waited, who'd trusted, who'd chosen her in return. The kids cheered behind them, frosting flying through the air. Later, after the candles had been blown out and Wes had fallen asleep in her lap, Quinn sat beside her on the porch of his house. You know, he said, brushing a leaf from her hair, I never thought a woman like you would end up in a town like this. Neither did I. But I'm glad you did. She looked down at the boy curled against her chest, at the stars overhead. At the man who'd given her everything without asking for anything. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And for the first time in her life, she meant it. Snow had dusted the edges of Fremont's sidewalks by the time Daphne fully settled into the rhythm of her new life. The leaves had fallen, and the bare branches outside Quinn's house now sparkled with frost each morning. She'd rented the small cottage behind the bakery and had started volunteering at the town learning center, tutoring teenagers in finance and entrepreneurship. It wasn't about returning to business. It was about passing on what she knew without the weight that used to come with it. And every night, she walked the few blocks to Quinn's house, where Wes would run to the door with his arms open, and Quinn would meet her eyes like she was the first sunrise after a long winter. One Thursday evening, while Wes painted a cardboard spaceship in the living room, Daphne sat at the kitchen counter watching Quinn slice pears for the tart she'd been craving all week. The warm scent of cinnamon drifted through the air. You know, she said, sipping tea, I never thought I'd live in a town where you can't get sushi after 7. You're adjusting, he said without looking up. I am. He glanced at her, then set the knife down. You're happier. I'm honest for the first time in a long time. I'm not on anyone's clock. I'm not performing. I'm just me. He wiped his hands on a towel, then walked around the counter. You're also avoiding something. She tilted her head. Am I? You've rebuilt your whole life here in 2 months. But you still haven't told your mother. Daphne exhaled, her fingers tightening around the mug. She won't understand. I didn't tell her I was stepping down. She still thinks I'm just on a sabbatical. She deserves to know the truth. She'll think I've lost my mind. Then let her. But don't build a new life on the fear of an old one. She stared at him, both annoyed and moved. You're annoyingly wise sometimes. He leaned down and kissed her forehead. It's part of my charm. She didn't call her mother that night, but she did the next morning. The conversation was brittle at first, full of clipped questions and shallow reassurances. But then, something cracked open. Daphne told her everything. About the breakdown she didn't see coming. About the silence she had needed. About the man and the boy who had reminded her what it meant to feel tethered to something real. Her mother didn't understand all of it, but she listened. And for now, that was enough. Later that week, Quinn surprised her with a drive into the hills just before sunset. He didn't say where they were going, only that Wes was spending the night at his cousin's house, and that Daphne should wear something warm. They parked near a clearing overlooking the valley, the sky strung with streaks of amber and violet. A small table had been set up near the edge of the bluff, with lanterns flickering in the wind and two chairs tucked close to each other. "You did this?" she asked, stepping out of the truck. "Had some help from the diner girls?" "Don't worry, I paid them in pie." She laughed as she sat down, her breath visible in the crisp air. The view was breathtaking, a sweeping canvas of pine and golden fields stretching into the distance. "This is where my dad used to bring me when things got hard," Quinn said, pouring cider into 2 mugs. "He'd say perspective is easier to find when you're higher than your problems." She reached for his hand across the table. "I think I love your dad. He would have liked you," Quinn said. "He had a thing for smart women who could make him nervous. You're nervous around me, every day." She squeezed his fingers. "Good." The silence between them wasn't empty. It buzzed with understanding, with warmth, with 1,000 things they didn't need to say out loud. Then Quinn stood, pulled something from his coat pocket and dropped to one knee. Daphne froze, her heart stuttering. "Before you say anything," he said, holding out a simple silver ring with a smooth blue stone nestled in its center. "This isn't about rushing anything. This isn't about changing who we are. This is about anchoring it. You changed my life, Daphne Lowell, not because of your name or your past, but because you made me believe in more. And because Wes loves you, and because I do too." Her eyes stung, but she didn't look away. "I want you here beside me, as long as you want to be." She knelt with him, her hands trembling as she reached for his face. "Yes." He kissed her slow and sure while the sky burned gold behind them. That winter, they were married in the town square under strings of lights and a blanket of fresh snow. Wes stood between them in a tiny navy suit, holding both their hands and beaming like he'd just won the lottery. The whole town came. The mayor gave a toast that was mostly off-topic. Mrs. Callahan cried into her 3rd glass of sparkling cider. The bakery made a cake so tall it had to be delivered in 2 parts. And Daphne wore a dress she'd found in a second-hand boutique, refusing to let anyone spend a fortune on a day that already felt priceless. After the ceremony, as snow began to fall again, Quinn pulled her aside. "You sure this isn't too small for you?" he asked, brushing snowflakes from her hair. She looked around at the town that had once been a hiding place and was now home, at the boy who called her his best friend. At the man who had quietly, steadily, fiercely loved her without asking her to become anyone but herself. "It's the biggest thing I've ever had," she whispered. He kissed her under the glowing lights while the town cheered behind them and the snow kept falling like confetti from heaven. Years later, Daphne would open a community center in Fremont's old train depot. She would teach young women how to build businesses with balance and heart, and she would sit beside Wes at every science fair and spelling bee. Quinn would still make her pear tarts on Thursdays, and every fall they'd return to the orchard where it all began. But none of that would ever be as important as this. She had found her life not in a boardroom or a penthouse or a press release, but in a town where the streets knew her name, in a child's laughter, in a man's steady hand. And for the rest of her days, she would never again wonder what it meant to belong.